Dr. Kalinga, Seneviratne, Lotus Communication Network Singapore, Dharmacharya, Shantum Seth, Mindfulness Trainer India, Mr. Vijayananda Rupa Singha, Kelania University of Sri Lanka, Mr. Dorjie Wangchuck, PhD scholar Bhutan, Dr. Binod Aggarwal, communication scholar India, to please take their seats on the dais. Uh, Professor Baidyanath Labh, who is the moderator, would be joining us shortly. Okay. Oh, he's here. I now hand over the proceedings to our moderator for the session one. Thank you so much.
They say it's better from there to get better sound. Is it working? Welcome, delegates. We had a very wonderful inaugural session, and we heard number of very renowned scholars who enlightened us with different aspects of mindfulness and how media be responsible, more responsive and positive towards reporting and all that. So now, this is the first plenary session, and as already announced, it will be focused on mindful communication for conflict avoidance and sustainable development in an Indic-Buddhist approach. The names of the speakers have already been announced. Only there is a small minor change. Vijayananda Rup Singhe, Dr. Vijayananda Rup Singhe from Sri Lanka, the Department of Mass Communication, University of Kelania. So he will speak on, his number will be 3 in sequence. So without wasting our time anymore and standing between you and the speakers, I invite Dr. Kalinga Seneviratne, whom we had met in Thailand just 3 months ago in Dharmacharya University, and we had wonderful communication as well, if you remember. So he has a very good communication, Lotus communication and network, and he's based in Singapore. So now I invite him kindly to deliver his speech.
Okay, thank you, Professor Baidyanath, for the introduction. I will make a few comments from here generally about how we got the conference together, and then I'll make the presentation I have prepared from up there. Venerable Sangha and distinguished guests. And I would like to thank IBC and the Vivekananda International Foundation for hosting this first Asian Buddhist Media Conclave, and the Ministry of Culture for sponsoring the event. This is a very challenging time for Buddhism in Asia, and as you know, how Buddhists across Asia, especially in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, have been projected by the international media, and there's hardly been any Buddhist voice to counter that. So for the last couple of years, Ashok and I have been talking about bringing Asian Buddhist media practitioners and scholars together to discuss how we could build cooperative media networks in the region. And since moving to Singapore 15 years ago, I have been traveling widely in the Asian region and noted how little Buddhists know about each other. And there is a lack of interaction among Buddhists, which also creates a lot of negative stereotypes about each other. And this is often picked up by Western media reporting on our communities and our countries. This is what we need to address in building strategic communication networks in Asia, drawing inspiration from history, where Indian wisdom, such as Buddhism, spread peacefully across Southeast and East Asia, enriching their civilizations. It is perhaps symbolic that we are beginning this journey here in India with funding from the Indian Cultural Ministry. In planning this event, I was quite persistent that we need to restrict the participation mainly to Asian Buddhists. It is mainly because we need to get rid of this mindset uh, of Asians that for anything to be considered contemporary and modern, it has to be validated by the West or by Westerners. So we allow our own heritage and wisdom to be reinterpreted to us by Westerners. The very fact that we are talking about mindfulness today has something to do with that, as you know. Often I have noted that rich Buddhist foundations, especially in East Asia, are willing to give millions of dollars to Western institutions or media people to establish Buddhist studies programs, especially in American universities, or for producing media products, but not to Asian organizations that is just asking for a few $1,000s. Such Western institutions usually treat Buddhism as an anthropological subject and ignore the fact that it is a living religion in Asia. Even Asian institutions get caught into this type of mindset. And a very good example is the Nalanda Srivijaya Center at the National University in Singapore. It has mainly become a good platform for European anthropologists to come and do research in Asia and tell us about the great Buddhist past and not the present. So when we when we look at Buddhism as an anthropological project, it is no wonder that young Asians, especially in East Asia and Southeast Asia, look at Buddhism as something related to the past, not cool enough for the present. We need to bring Buddhism to the popular culture of the young people. Otherwise, all these grand temples we build will become like Borobudur in Indonesia, just historic monuments. Developing a mindful communication strategy is very important in this process. So let me turn to my prepared presentation on this topic, and I'll present it from there. Some 25 years ago in Sydney, when my son Nishan was just 8 years old, he brought a video recording his teacher has made during a school excursion to Science Centre. Actually, he was born and raised in Australia. The students were asked to sit on a simulated television news studio and read a piece of news. He has put on a jacket and said, looking straight into the camera, "Today in Sri Lanka, there was a bomb blast, and the army has bashed and killed many people." So, aghast at what he saw as news, I asked him, "How can you say that? You have been to Sri Lanka many times, and you haven't seen that there." And his reply was, "Well, the teacher asked me to read news, and that is what I did." So during the evenings at between 6 and 8 o'clock, my wife and I used to sit and watch television news, especially on ABC and SBS television in Australia. And he used to sit with us and watch it as well. So he knew, even at that young age, that news was about conflict and violence, but the reality was different. I can remember interviewing a veteran Indian journalist, Chakravarti Raghavan, in Geneva in the 1980s. When he told me, exception makes the news. Few months later, when I put this question to Michael Roepka, who was then the editor-in-chief of the Reuters news agency, he told me, no one is interested to know if I went to work safely, but if you fell under a bus, they will be interested to know. So that is what is news. Reporting about exceptional circumstances and not the everyday reality. Today, as news media becomes excessively commercialized and competitive, they have taken news presentations to extremes, sensationalizing and dramatizing. So those of us who watch the news become so depressed. What a terrible world we live in. In fact, I have stopped watching television news now. I think we have a deep-rooted problem in the way we teach journalism. What we teach as news is too adversarial, and it is conflict-driven. We look at a conflict and say, to be balanced, we give two opposing views. That in itself creates a conflict. So can we develop a model of news reporting that is less adversarial and more geared towards understanding society and people and promote social harmony in the society to avoid could play a role. Today, most of the media function theories we have been teaching for the past 50 years have become redundant, including the libertarian theory that underpins the Western free media model. Rather than mass communication, what the mainstream media is doing today is strategic communications. That is why they call each other fake news. Past 2 years, I was coordinating a project at Bangkok's Chulalongkorn University that was funded by UNESCO called Mindful Communication for ASEAN Integration, where we developed curriculum to train future Asian journalists in a non-adversarial way of reporting. We present it as human-centric approach to news reporting. And I would call the new reporters we will be training communicators rather than journalists. Because when you say journalists, you expect them to behave and think in a certain way. Now we are trying to change that way of thinking and also reporting. At the end of the project, I edited a book that was published by SAGE titled Mindful Communication for Sustainable Development, Perspectives from Asia. So this has perspectives from number of people who are involved in our workshop, and a few of them are here today with us. What we have done is we have developed curriculum to train future Asian journalists so that this type of reporting coming from Asia, using concepts from Asian philosophy, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Confucius, and a lot of it is from Buddhism, could be adopted in the practice of journalism. Currently, I'm discussing with Professor Biplab Lolo Chowdhury at Shantinikeyan University. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. He was supposed to be in our panel because his brother died last week. About introducing some short courses using this book as a main text. And I hope now Nalanda could, in the next session which follows, we can also discuss about other universities getting involved in it as well. Let me quote Thai communication specialist Pipap Panishapakdi. Actually, he's here with us today. In the book, in the chapter he has written, he says news has to be critical, but being critical does not have to be confrontational. Being critical is looking at things objectively, but the approach of doing it does not have to be negative. Thus, he argues that what we need to do is to create a dialogue, something more than a discourse, more than words, an ongoing dialogue as a news piece. In little more than a decade, mindfulness, which is rooted in the Buddhist practice of Vipassana Bhavana, as you know, has become a fad and a multi-million-dollar industry in the West. Some think, even people in Asia think, that mindfulness is the invention of an American professor at MIT. And this is exactly what made me and Chulalongkorn University to apply to UNESCO to bring mindfulness back to Asia and initiate a process from within Asia. Let me give you a couple of examples of how Buddhist teachings could be adopted in this new communication strategy. Buddhism teaches that there's three poisons: lobha, greed, dvesha, hatred, and moha, delusion. These lead to greed for resources or wealth, that leads to hatred because you believe in the delusion that you need certain resources and wealth to be developed, to be a developed society, which you may need to grab from others. This leads to dukkha or sorrow. We can see it happening all over the world today. Mindful communication would require the journalist or communicator to understand the reasons for this sorrow or unhappiness and to desist from using his or her craft to promote tanha, desire, and upadana, clinging. The other is the noble eightfold path, dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, and magga. If we introduce this path to the practice of journalism, the first step will be for the communicator to be trained in deep listening so that he or she could develop compassion and better understanding of the reasons for people's dukkha or unhappiness or unsatisfactoriness. How can you diagnose the origins and what can be done to eradicate this suffering? Could you develop a communication path to help to envision a solution? As a communicator, how could you create that ongoing dialogue as a news piece to help solve the problem? Founder of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, Sulak Sivaraksa, often describes the root cause of suffering as the structural violence of the global economic system. We see trade agreements with no concern for the workers, labor migration that has become the 21st century slavery trade, land grabbing for development, grabbing of people's water resources by corporations, IMF policies that drive farmers to suicide, and human trafficking that create immigration conflicts are some of this structural violence, I suppose Sulak Sivaraksa is talking about, which the commercialized corporate media prefers to ignore very often, because sometimes their own owners are part of the problem. Another area where we could explore is Panchasila. All 5 precepts cover corruption, killing, stealing, lying, sexual exploitation and misconduct, drugs and alcohol. We could incorporate these into a journalism code of ethics or guidelines in investigating and reporting corruption. So these are the formidable issues mindful communication strategy need to address, and it is a great challenge for all of us. I think in Asia, the greatest challenge we face as communicators or scholars in communication is to decolonize the minds of our own communicators or communication scholars in Asia, who are quite happy to teach mass communication straight out of textbooks written for American universities that include communication theories that not are relevant to our religion, and many of these are today defunct as well, even in the West. Often these Asians with the colonized mindset think that we are anti-Western when we try to promote mindful communications from an Asian perspective. But if the same is promoted or told by a Western academy, they will be willing to listen. So this is the greatest challenge we face today, and I hope at the conclave, we would be able to initiate a movement that would gradually decolonize the minds of Asian communicators first and help to create a more cooperative media culture. Thank you very much.
Should we have the discussion? So now I invite Dharmacharya Shantum Seth, who is going to speak on mindfulness, who is himself a mindfulness teacher, trainer. He is going to make his presentations. Please.
So, dear friends, thank you very much for inviting me to share my views on a subject which I must say I had to twist my head around a bit to understand because there was so much in it. But as we discussing, or we are in a forum of Buddhists and Hindus, I felt we could start with what I always like to do, is to start with this little meditation bell, just inviting the bell 3 times so that we can come back to our breath. This is a practice I do every day, just to help us, as you hear the sound of the bell, to come back to your breath, just the natural breathing. And I'll invite it 3 times so you can come back to your breath about 9 times. And the breath, of course, links our body and mind together. So our body is here, but our mind may be somewhere else. So how to bring our mind and body into the present moment, to really touch the present moment where we can really have any effectiveness in our life. So, dear friends, that is a bell of mindfulness. And it's invited in all the monasteries and temples right across many Buddhist countries. Every time the bell is invited, we stop. We stop to whatever we're doing. We're speaking, we're walking, and then we come back to our breath, and then we smile. We smile with the awareness that we are alive. And that is the cultivation of mindfulness, the energy of mindfulness that we cultivate, the energy of present moment awareness, of non-judgmental present moment awareness. But of course, I came to this much later through a search. I remember more than 30 years ago, I met my teacher. I was a Halla Bol activist. My friends from across Asia, Halla Bol means like a street activist, going to jail, organizing dharnas. And this teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Vietnamese Zen master, asked me, can you write a love letter to the Prime Minister? And I sort of stopped. And I realized I was not capable of writing a love letter to my Prime Minister. There was so much anger in me. There was so much judgmental angst in me. And at that point, I realized that I have to find peace in myself and not just be fighting for peace. And I think that was a great wake-up call for me. I then went searching how to find peace, practicing how to find peace in myself. And what I've understood is that peace in oneself and peace in the world are 2 sides of the same coin, in a way. And then, as we know, the topic goes into the sustainable development element. So peace in one mind develops to a peaceful world. So a healthy mind develops into a healthy society, a healthy development process. And the Venerable Dhammapiya, in fact, talked about that. He said something like, mind development is sustainable development. And I like that. That is, so the inner and the outer cannot be separated. And that's very much part of our understanding of Buddhism, and also the mind training. So that's why our trust, we have a trust called Ahimsa Trust, and we do a lot of work with children on bringing mindfulness to education, understanding how children can develop that energy. And so we are thinking, as Guru Murthy Ji was saying, we are thinking 300 years ahead, 5, 6 generations ahead. How do we see India in the future, not just in the next 5 years? And that means a shift in our mindset. And of course, maybe it doesn't require 300 years, maybe it requires only 50 years. But we see how that is. But I think we do need those perspectives, the helicopter perspective, as he said, but not just on space, but on time. And nobody knows what the future will be, but we can have a sense of the perennial truths, the perennial practices that have been going on. And when we looked at this mindfulness again, I like the word mindful. I think my friend Dr. Kalinga is saying that it's becoming a multi-million-dollar industry. I agree. I'm calling it mindfulness, like McDonald's. It's becoming a bit like that. So we have to be careful that it doesn't get taken out of the moorings of the Eightfold Path, of ethics, of the Buddha's original teachings, and not just a stress reduction technique of selling it to corporates. But that's not bad either. But it opens the door. So I can't be critical of it. But as a Buddhist, I feel we have to be cautious how it's done. It's a bit like Hatha Yoga. If you see how Hatha Yoga is developed, now we have all sorts. Now, in a way, we can say it's a very good thing because it has opened it up to the world. It's one of India's great spiritual exports, but now it's become a body exercise export. And maybe that wasn't the intention, but that's how it's been transmuted into the West. And I think when we communicate mindfully, when we understand each other mindfully, when we sit together mindfully, there is a sense of avoiding conflict in the essence of that awareness. And I'm going to give you two examples in a moment about what I see as practical techniques that have been used in the Buddhist monasteries for 2,500 years, how to avoid conflict. You can see that the Buddhist community has been the longest running organization in the world, older than the Christian church. And so for any group like that, you have to have conflict resolution methods, but also conflict avoidance methods within the context of the community. We have enough problem with just dealing with one person, even with ourselves. And you can think of how many thousands of people are living in a monastery together sometimes, and how much conflict can arise. Human beings are human beings. We have all our greed and ego, etc. But very briefly, I just want to touch on how, because the last part of the topic is the Indic-Buddhist approach. So I just to touch on it, because we all know what the Eightfold Path is. But I think that matrix is very helpful to us whenever we try and understand anything or the Buddha's teachings. And here, communication is based so much on speech, what we say, how we say it, our skillful speech. Of course, we don't lie, but we also don't embroider things. We don't say one thing to somebody else, one person, one thing to somebody else, which is often the game of diplomacy today, unfortunately. We see all sorts of different things happening. And so we have to be attentive to our speech. We have to be attentive to our actions. But often comes back to our intention. We have to go to right thought and thinking. What is the intention? What is the motivation why we're doing things? And that is preceded by right view, which is about how we understand that we are interdependent. Your view or your happiness is my happiness. Your suffering is my suffering. And that is very much the teaching of the Buddha's Patit-Samutpada, the dependent origination, that we are not independently existing entities. So I think that's a very important matrix to look at, this whole subject. We don't have much time, but we can look at sustainable development in that matrix. We can look at mindful communication in that matrix too. But as I said earlier, that we must remember that the Buddha gave us teaching on right mindfulness. In the first teaching, he gave it Sarna and the Eightfold Path. So he's talking about mindfulness right there in Sarnath, in the Deer Park, 2,500 years ago. So it's nothing new. It's obviously not being created by MIT. But we also have to know that it's part of our Indic civilization. That seed of mindfulness is present in all of us. And it's been, we sometimes don't water it enough. That seed is in our consciousness. So how do we water that seed of mindfulness as a collective consciousness? And that's why I said what we're trying to do with children and schools is trying to do that in a secular spirituality, in a sort of way, not saying this is Buddhist, but really as a mind training technique of how to handle your emotions. I went to school many years ago, but even today when I talk to principals, they never teach children how to handle their fear, their anger, how to develop compassion. It's all about external world. And so how to understand the mind. Teachers say concentrate. They don't teach how to concentrate. So these are the sort of processes that come through mindfulness. And we've seen now, thanks to the Western neuroscience, that techniques like this, when we developed it scientific, or we experimented with them scientifically, even in 8 weeks, we see that the gray matter density of certain parts of the brain increases. This is the area of the hippocampus where we have the cognitive awareness. memory, executive decision making. All these areas are enhanced even in the 8-week course. And the areas like the amygdala, the gray matter density decreases when there were areas of stress and emotional reactivity. So in a way, it is helpful to us. What we've known for 2,600 years in our civilization is now being authenticated by the West, and that's why we're getting this sort of stamp or chapa of the West, which is okay, but we shouldn't. I think I clearly agree with the previous speakers that we have to see that this has an Asian civilizational base, and we have to look at that and project that in our own way, in whatever small or bigger way. So I'm just going to give you 2 examples that I used, as I said, in the Buddhist community, which are helpful. We had a conference a bit like this in Myanmar, I think in last year in August. So a similar sort of topic on, I think the topic was the Global Initiative for Conflict Avoidance and Environmental Consciousness. And so I spoke a little bit about this. I won't develop this particular point much, but but some of you are not there. So it's a process called beginning anew. This is based for conflict avoidance in Buddhist communities. And what happens here, and this can be also done in families. I do this with my wife, my children. And so it's not just there, and we do it in our work. So it can be done in a workplace, in a family, and of course in the Buddhist community. And there are 3 parts to it, 3 or 4 parts to it. The first part of it is we call flower watering. Now, when you sit with somebody who's in your community or your child or your wife, you often water the flower. All of us are like a flower, but we forget to water the flower, and so the flower gets a bit droopy. You often see married couples living many years together. They've forgotten why they were together. So I think it's very good. It's a way of sort of recognizing the other person and saying, you did this for me. It could be something like you made some very nice food for me, or when I came home I was tired and you gave me a glass of water, or whatever. You are working hard. So it can be, but it's just the appreciation. So I call flower watering that. It's being aware, being mindful of the other person in your life and in the wider society. Some people may be doing work like people in VIF are trying to work to shift consciousness in society. So being appreciative. Sometimes the family member says, you're never at home. But also the other way is you're appreciating that you're doing something for the society. So I think that appreciation is very important. And sometimes you can just stop at that. We do that with children, and it's very nice. But then the second part of that is sort of expressing a regret. You may have done something or said something which is unskillful. So if you say it yourself, it has much more meaning than somebody. So you say, I'm sorry that there was, I just said something because I felt I was irritated or whatever the issue is. So that's the second. And then third is where you express your hurt. Somebody's done something or said something which has hurt you, and you do it in a skillful way. Again, you think of 2 or 3 good things about the person before you share this, so that the person is willing to listen, and you're saying it from a voice of compassion, and you're not trying to blame. And then again, you say something nice. So the whole thing doesn't end in a sort of note of discordancy. But I'll stop on that one because I did talk a little bit more in Myanmar on that. But what I didn't speak on, and I think it's an important, another, for want of a word, technique, but I look at it as a practice. We look at everything as a practice in Buddhism rather than a technique, is what we call the 7 practices of reconciliation. Because whatever we do, there is going to be conflict. And as Gurumurtiji said, in some ways, human beings are sort of DNA'd into conflict in some way. But I think we can shift the DNA now now that we know that epigenetics has that sort of ability. But yes, it's very deeply embedded in our way of being on this earth. And again, this technique can be used in family. So I'll just go through the 7. Now, the first, so when there's a problem, so some conflicts have arisen, and this also matters in small conflicts, not only big conflicts. So the first thing we do is we get all the people in the Sangha, and the Sangha here means the fourfold Sangha, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, or Upasaks, Upasaka. And we sit together, and we just sit in meditation and breathe, just together. And and the 2 people who have the conflict may sit face to face, and all of us. Just that process of being together and sitting in silence, breathing, smiling, hopefully, just with that awareness, has an effect of calming things down. And we find that everyone expects that they're already creating an atmosphere of peace in that space. So they also we don't try and think of what is the rumors going on in town or what is happening. everything that we said will be said in public in that space. The second thing part of it is called remembrance. So here what we do is each person, two people who are in conflict or two groups, they try and recall everything that has happened about that story. It was, the 21st of, you can say it was that day, it was raining, I had to take shelter under the tree, and you can go on like this, but every detail of that situation, it's a story they're telling about it's not just the conflict. So, and that in itself creates a context, because in that you start seeing many things. They both do that. They try and remember exactly what is happening at that point. And again, this is, as I said, can be useful in our society, with children, families, that we can do this. The third element I call is non-stubbornness. Now, here, the fact that we are sitting together says that we are willing to reconcile. That in itself is a big thing. And also trying to do our best, really trying to do our best to resolve this. It's interesting, my friend Ajir, who's here, was reminding me just before this that the one teacher who explicitly mentioned not being stubborn was the Buddha. In the Kalama Sutra, he says that don't even believe what I say. Test it like you test gold. And if it brings you happiness, if it brings you peace, if it brings happiness and peace to others around you, then it is a good practice. But don't believe it because even I say it, or because you've heard it, or because the elders say it, or because the books say it. You have to try it. And that is a great teaching of the spirit of free inquiry, which I think you were saying very much. And I think it's also part of our Indic civilizational thrust, partly from the Buddhic civilizational element of it. I don't know other teachers. I'm not well versed with other teachers more in the Sanatana element. So I'm not sure whether the other teachers also said something like this. But I know that the Buddha has explicitly said it in a sutra, because the Kalama tribe people come, the Kalama people say, this teacher says this teacher says this teacher says this. Who do we believe? And so he goes on to say, don't even believe me, just try it and work it. The fourth element of this 7-point reconciliation process is called covering the mud with straw. Now here what happens is that you take a senior person who's with one of the monks, or one of the people, a grief party, and the other, and they speak on behalf of them. They don't say very much. We have a respect for the people who are elders often in that community, and they will say something to support that person. And then the other senior person will protect the other one, or like, so it's a sort of dialogue or a communication representing people. And why do we call it covering the mud with straw? Is because the mud is the conflict, and the straw is the practice or the teaching of loving kindness. So we're covering the mud with straw. We do this. There's mud. Yesterday we were in Sarnath, as many of us know, and there was a lot of mud. And they had not covered with straw, but they'd covered with wood. So, we do have to cover. So it's the same sort of idea that you need to share the practice of loving kindness and compassion for the conflict to dissolve a bit. The fifth element is a voluntary confession. Now, each monk then reveals his own or her own shortcomings. And first, they may reveal a minor weakness. But what happens is when you reveal, when you admit, it's not guilt, it's not a sort of, but it's saying that I'm aware that I've been unskillful. It allows the other one to open up. And he or she also opens up to share their own shortcoming and confess in a way. And this grows bigger and bigger. So this is partly the process of how you create dialogue and this sort of mindful communication in this process, that you're willing to admit a bit, and then the other one admits. It goes on. The last two are the decision by consensus. Now, I know this is something which people feel maybe not so practicable, but in the Buddha's time, decisions were made by consensus. Even today, in many of the Buddhist communities, decisions are made by consensus. There isn't the idea of democracy where the majority oppress the minority. So it's a sort of idea of consensus. Now, consensus doesn't always have to mean that everyone has to agree. And as Gurudamurti said, I was very impressed by his talk, and I say it was really wonderful to hear what he was saying. we can agree to disagree. So we don't have to block the decision. I'd say I don't agree with this view. However, I do not feel strongly enough to block the decision because the general feeling of the House is that this should be the decision. So I think that idea of the understanding consensus, in the Buddha's time, all decisions were made by consensus. So I think it's an important practice, and I would encourage that in any communication, especially when we're dealing with different ideologies or philosophies. And he's very right. Ideologies don't want to discuss like that. They agree or disagree. But here, if you can bring it more to philosophical base and and make the ideology ideas rather than ideology, so we don't stick it in the mud. And then the last element is accepting the verdict itself, and that is very important, that the people who are in the conflict accept the verdict. And how it's done in the Buddhist community, after one person will get up, one of the elders will get up and say, after all this meditation, discourse, discussion, exploration, we've now come to this discussion, this decision, and this person should do this. He says it once, and everyone stays silent. It means it's agreed. And we do it 3 times. And 3 times, after 3 times, if it's said and there's silence, it means it's agreed. And then the monk or the nun or the upasaka agrees and has to follow that particular decision. And they've already taken that idea. So I won't go on more because we have other speakers, but I feel that we have many, many examples in the Buddhist Sutra, in the Buddha's own life, how he created a harmony between or avoided conflict between the Kolyas and Shakyas, the tribe of his mother and his father, over the water dispute. And so there are many examples like that, and also examples where he failed in Kosambi, where he was not successful. So we have to learn from our mistakes. It's not that he was infallible. And we as people living in Asia in the 21st century have to learn not just from Indic civilizational way, which is the topic, but I think more even from our brothers and sisters in the diaspora of Buddhist civilization now across Asia, where we have lost Buddhism in India to a large degree, but the seeds of what were cultivated in India have now flourished across Asia. And I'm very grateful to many of our brothers from Asia who've come, or sisters from Asia who've come here to share with us, to learn and to co-learn this process of how to bring, mindful communication, avoid conflicts, and bring sustainable development to our Earth, not just Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Shantamji. Please. Now I invite Dr. Vijayananda Roopsinghe from Sri Lanka. Please.
Dear Reverend, dear colleagues, delegates, brothers and sisters who are here representing the media, dear ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here to speak on mindful communication and good governance. First of all, I must thank the organizing committee of the conference and Dr. Kalinga Seneviratne for inviting me to make this presentation. Even though this is a very broad topic, I will try my best to limit my presentation as the organizing committee has allocated me. Mindfulness may be a global movement today, especially in the West, where companies are offering mindfulness meditation courses for the employees to boost productivity. But what about the application to addressing a good governance and tracking corruption? The World Bank formulated the concept of good governance in 1992. The bank defined the concept as the manner in which power is exercised in the management of a country's economic and social resources for development. The phrase good governance may be literally defined as a system of good control, good administration, or good management, which is universally accepted by all as an ideology for running a government, an organization, or a firm. The word Dhammapassana is Pali means good governance, Dhamma, virtue, law, and Passana, governance, which means a law of governance. The United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, UNESCO, states that governance has good governance has 8 major characteristics. It is participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive, and follows the rule of law. It assures the corruption is minimized. The views of minorities are taken into an account, and the voices of the most vulnerable in the society are heard in decision making. It is also responsive to the present and future needs of society. These 8 characteristics reinforce each other, and proper governance strategy needs to be taken cognizance of each. Buddhism believes in the innate goodness not only of human beings but also in every creature in the world. It identifies all humans as Manusya because of their better development brain or mind. Therefore, in human society, we discover men and women purposefully and meaningfully engage in work. They are motivated to work for various reasons, particularly personal, individual reasons, collective reasons also exist. Even though individual differences due to heredity, genetic and environmental karmatic factors could occur, their essential nature remains the same. In contemporary society, huge accusations come from civil society on bribery and corruption of politicians and officials. The Buddha once said, when the ruler of a country is just and good, the ministers become just and good. When the ministers are just and good, the higher officials become just and good. When the higher officials are just and good, the rank and file become just and good. When the rank and file become just and good, the people become just and good. Anguttara Nikaya. Buddhism is concerned with all beings, sabbe satta. The Buddha said that immorality and crime would arise from poverty, but it is fertile to eradicate crime through force. The Kutadanta Sutta, the Buddha shows economic development as a precious way to reduce crime. According to Buddha, nothing can be called a just war, which is only a false term coined and put into the circulation to justify and execute hatred, cruelty, violence, and massacre. The Buddhist perspective, the ruler must follow the Dasaraja Dharma, the 10 rules Buddha prescribes and good governance they are as follows. Be liberal and avoid selfishness. Maintain a high moral character. Be prepared to sacrifice one's own pleasure for well-being of the subjects. Be honest and maintain absolute integrity. Be kind and gentle. Lead a simple life for subjects to emulate. Be free from hatred of any kind. Exercise nonviolence. Practice patience. Respect public opinion to promote peace and harmony. In the Chakravarti Sihanada Sutra, he further advised a good ruler should act impartially and should not be biased and discriminate between one particular group or subjects against another. A good ruler should not harbor any form of hatred against his subjects. A good ruler should show no fear whatsoever in the enforcement of the law if it is justifiable. A good ruler must possess a clear understanding of law to be enforced. It should not be enforced just because of the ruler has the authority to enforce the law. It must be done in a reasonable manner and with common sense. Buddhist literature suggests that Buddhism would uphold democracy as the ideal from the polity. Being empirical in approach, Buddhism accepts economic security. But Buddha did not consider the formulation of comprehensive economic theory. His concern was more on the ethical aspects of economy rather than on the theory or subtle mechanism involved in it. In the teaching of Buddha, middle path is not a condition between two extremes. The middle path means choosing the correct one when two extremes exist, abandoning both of them. The Buddha's middle path means the most effective way leading to the cessation of dukkha. It lies between the extremes of searching for happiness through the pleasure of senses and other extremes searching for the same truth, self mortification in different forms of asceticism. The middle path is a way of transcending both extremes. So, how would the middle path and the good governance interact? In good governance, the king, queen, or the government must spread the four sublime states mind of all living beings: metta, loving kindness; karuna, compassion; mudita, sympathetic joy; upekka, equanimity. Good governance is now most used as a concept in discussing development literature, but it is not a new concept, as I discussed earlier. Buddhist literature clearly shows an emphasis on good governance. The Buddhist politics highly valued moral conduct in politics. Now we are living in a very complicated world. We highly value economic development rather than moral development. Consequently, money has become a powerful tool when tracking social problems. Bribery, corruption, crime, mental depression of people, individualism, overconsumption, etc. have become common problems in all countries around the world. The Buddhist Majjhima Pratipada, middle path, offers a precise way to solve most of the problems, also known as the Noble Eightfold Path. It provides a valuable roadmap to reach development goals. The mass media, including social media, have become integral part of contemporary society. Although today's advanced digital technology enables to media to reach the people rapidly, most media fail to target their content toward human development. It is quite evident that media generated emotions has significant implication for actions and interaction within the large social world. So our co-panelist Dorjie from Bhutan will be talking about the middle path journalism. So I will leave him to talk how about the middle path could be incorporated into the practice of journalism. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I invite Mr. Dorjie Wangchuck from Bhutan to make his presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for bringing me to Delhi. It's a place very close to my heart. As a student going to Europe, I used to take flights from Palam Airport, which has now become something much bigger. As an engineer in the Bhutan Broadcasting Service, I used to work very closely with All India Radio and Doordarshan here in Delhi. And my last position in the government was the media advisor to the king, and I visited Delhi several times, accompanying the royal entourage. The last being the Republic Day in 2013. So it's a place very close to my heart, and I was very excited when Kalinga informed me about this conference and that my possible participation. With this short introduction, let me go to my presentation. I come from a professional background in the sense that I started my career as a broadcast engineer, moved to documentary filmmaking and journalism and column writing, and finally as a newsmaker representing the royal family. So so what I present here is not from the ivory tower of the academic world, but rather a blend of what I have been through and what I see now as an academician. I'm currently a researcher at the University of Macau and a visiting professor for the Royal University of Bhutan. So the topic that I will discuss, what my previous speaker has introduced, how can we engage the profound philosophy of middle path in journalism? Briefly, if we look at the history of the Bhutanese media, we have seen Winsel that started off as a newspaper in 1967, radio that came in 1974, and a royal decree that granted both the print and the newspaper the autonomy, slowly moving to what we call the freedom of press freedom in Bhutan with the constitution in 2008. So the evolution of the Bhutanese media has been more in terms of giving it a development journalism approach. However, in the post 2008, that's the year that Bhutan adopted democratic elections and parliamentary form of government with the king as the head of state and an elected prime minister looking after the governance. We see lots of new models being introduced in the country. The fourth estate model, the anti-establishment model, and basically what I am saying is that the current media is bit modelless and bit directionless, and that's the genesis of the mill-path journalism and the mindfulness communication, which the media fraternity met in Paro, and we discussed a new way forward or a search for a new way. The problem is further augmented by the social media that has completely taken over the traditional media. That's happening not just in Bhutan but across the globe, and we see the rise of the social media together with decline in trust in institutions. So that with institutions, I also include the institution of the media. So this is the reality that is not just in Bhutan, but almost in every country that I have visited and I have seen. So where do we move? Now, if we go back to the principle of the media, is that it shapes the public opinion, and whatever public opinion that we can that are shaped is that we need to look at the societal values. So the value becomes one of our pillars of the discussion on middle path journalism. The second uh, proposition that I have is that media, as as a public institution in every country, should facilitate towards working towards a vision of a country, not being being anti government at all the time, or being as we had listened earlier, confrontational. Something I think even in the if you look at the four normative theory of the press, there is also the facilitative and the collaborative roles, which actually the media has actually forgotten. So only the critical and the radical role is being exercised, but the facilitative and the role of the media is actually forgotten. So how can we make media inclusive of these values and vision? And that is the genesis for the need for a new media model. Now, if we look at the vision, the development philosophy of Bhutan has been the gross national happiness, which was enunciated by the former king in the early 70s. Where he emphasized happiness over gross domestic product or gross national product. You remember that was the measurement before the GDP. So even democracy that has been instituted in 2008 has been seen as a means towards a greater vision of the country. And we all know that media is a means towards democracy. And democracy is a means towards the greater well-being of a nation. So my proposition is that media is a means towards a means to a greater greater goal. So which means that it ultimately implies that media should work towards the greater goal and not against it or in any confrontational manner. A few words on happiness, which is the most misunderstood word right now. There is overemphasis of happiness with Bhutan. Wherever I go, they ask me whether Bhutan is the happiest land. It isn't. We have our own problems and issues. We are a normal country with all the normal problems. The genesis of gross national happiness actually has more inclination towards the concept of contentment. Happiness is transitory, it is very subjective, whereas contentment is more profound. So when we talk about the philosophy of gross national happiness, we are talking more about contentment. A person need not necessarily be happy, but he or she can be content, especially depending on the Buddhist concept of impermanence and karmic consequences. So an old lady who is poor, widowed, may not be happy, but could be content, accepting the fact that this is just my karma. So that's the genesis of gross national happiness. Even if we go to written policies, the concept of contentment comes in a document of 1729 by the ruler back then, who mentioned that if the government cannot make the people happy, it has no right to exist, and that was one of the profound uh, legal code mentioned from that era. If we look at even the national anthem of Bhutan, we don't talk about happiness, but rather we talk about peace and prosperity. So it's Bandi Kinima Sharvasho, which means that may the sun of peace and contentment shine on the people, but not really that the happiness be shining on the people of Bhutan. So one of the first foremost of the proposition that I make in terms of vision is the concept of contentment. So the second pillar of my proposition is the values, the societal values, the social values that we are grown up with, the socialization process that we have. I think that one of the role of the media is to propagate that and pass it to the next generation. In fact, one of the definitions given on the gross national happiness, GNH, by the current king is that it is a development with values. And if we look at what are the values in the Bhutanese society, we have Mang, which is community, Thadamsi, which is a sacred commitment between you and the others. Then we have Nyingje, which is compassion. And lastly, Lejude, which is the karmic cause and effect. So these are the values with which we grow up and which binds Bhutan as a society. So media as a public institution must take these values towards the next generation, just as we received from our parents. Briefly on the middle way philosophy, it is not a midpoint. It's not a mediocrity. It's not a middle way. It's not a midpoint between two extremes. But as my previous speaker mentioned, it is choosing the right way. So the middle path journalism that I propose, first of all, should promote contentment. And I feel we need to promote contentment, especially if we are proposing a sustainable development. There is so much of discontentment. There is so much of greed. I mean, I don't want to elaborate on this, but if the media as a public institution can promote a little bit of contentment, perhaps we can achieve some level of sustainable development. The second pillar is promoting community. As Dr. Kalinga mentioned, our media and communication theories come from the West, where individualism is promoted, whereas here in Asia, we are more a collectivist society. And the third is, again, when we talk about commitment, when we talk about community, we're not saying that that media persons should not bring out cases of corruptions or injustice. That is covered in the third pillar, where as a media person, you have a sacred commitment to the vocation, to the people that you serve, to the institutions that you report. That comes under Thadamse. Last, compassion. This is one of the pillars that I find it very interesting, especially in a country like Bhutan that has three different worldviews: the worldviews of my father, my worldview, Western educated, and the worldviews of my children. Some years back, a local governor accidentally fired his pistol and killed someone. When that news broke out, the Western educated guys, we said we went all haywire. We wanted justice. We wanted the police and the investigations and all this to jail the governor and do whatnot. When I talked to my father, he just said, "Oh well, that is perhaps just a karmic consequences. Maybe the person had killed the governor in his past life, so this is what it is." So what I'm saying is that when we look at events, we don't compress everything into what is happening now. So in Buddhism, time has to be expanded little to the past and little to the future. So the time is elastic, okay, which means that there is no need for the victim to be over glorified. There is no need for the perpetrator to be over vilified. I think everyone deserves some level of compassion, some level of feeling, some level of acceptance, not to condone the violence or the. So of course, middle path philosophy is a very profound. I dare not make any definition, but let me say what middle path journalism is and what is this not. It's not another set of code for journalists. It's not a parallel or an alternative form of journalism. It is just another way another way of doing journalism that our media persons could perhaps adopt. There have been a lot of similar movements. For example, peace journalism in countries after the conflict, restorative journalism that has come out from Colombia. So this is another alternative or a way to do journalism in our society here in Asia. So what I define, this is the working definition, is that middle path journalism is a media model that takes into account the social cultural values and the nation's vision. And that is a working definition that I have given. So it's not only in doing journalism, but it also in consuming media content. As we have more and more social media, and where user-generated contents are almost a normal now, I think there has to be not only middle path journalism among the traditional media, but also among the users and among people in the society. I'll skip this part because it was already mentioned by Dr. Kalinga. So middle path journalism is first of all where extremes are avoided in expressing opinion, in reporting, in writing, for the reasons that I've mentioned. more emphasis on community and not on individual rights and human rights and all the values that we have transplanted from the West, where news and information is a social good, not a commercial commodity. And lastly, where there are also space for good stories, human interest stories, not just stories about rapes, victims, conflicts, and confrontations. And last, where news value is measured through some form of local parameters, not through some standards that we have been taught with. So this is, in conclusion, what Bud journalism is about, all about, and it's a work in progress. It's not definitive. What I'm doing right now is that there is more work being done on what middle path philosophy is all about. Secondly, a better appreciation of the social and traditional, social and philosophical traditions that this continent has provided, especially India, that has given birth to some of the finest civilizations, including what we call Buddhism. So with that, I would like to thank you for not sleeping over my presentation, and I'll be happy to respond any questions. Thank you very much.
Now, last speaker is Dr. Binod Aggarwal. He is himself a communication scholar, and I invite him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and especially Kalinga, who is instrumental in getting me here. I prepared a very brief presentation, about 5-6 minutes, of mindful communication for conflict-free sustainable development. I want to emphasize the term conflict-free instead of what has been said so far. In the contemporary world, I will talk a little bit and then I'll move on to talk a little bit what I think journalism communication should teach as a teacher and how we should introduce the idea of media research in Buddhism, which is, I think, is essential for further development. Let me just read it. The contemporary world is in the midst of multiple conflicts and confrontation between individuals, religious groups, and nations, whether conflicts are border, trade, or economic, competition, political, religious, and ideological rivalries, to mention a few. In more than one way, Asia has become the hotbed of these conflicts and confrontations. Asia is one of the oldest birthplaces of many civilizations and religions. Almost all major religions of the world are associated with Asia. While large part of the world was sailing in the dark ages, I'm talking of 1,000 years ago, Asia, especially Bharatvarsh, now known as India, divided into 3 parts thanks to British colonial rulers. At that time, at that moment in history, India was debating and discussing new religious thoughts and doctrines. This all was happening almost about a millennium before the birth of Lord Christ. That's important to remember, that it is a pre-Christian era everywhere in the world. And that has been unfortunate, at least for India, that we know our history from 1857 only, when the British wrote the first written document about Indian history. I'm not going to get into that, but it was an era of spiritual unrest, dissatisfaction with prevailing ritualistic and social rigidity of Sanatana Dharma, which is now called is Hindu, but the word is Sanatana Dharma. Having confusing, conflicting, and contradictory religious thoughts and discourses on the existence of Almighty God, and suggesting of multiple methods of
human salvation of this issue. 6th century BCE, China and India had religious maturity to indulge into new flavor of spiritual unrest and intense debate that engulfed the large part of Asia. The era saw the advent of Buddhism along with Jainism, Ajivik, which is a now unknown religion, disappeared in 15th century AD, which along with the Ajivik founder Ghosal, Lord Mahavihare and Buddha, there are references they met each other. Some says that they never met, but that's the three religions that grew up in India at that time. Why the Sanatana Dharma, Hindu religion as I call it today, translated religion wrongly. The term religion is a misnomer to Sanatana Dharma. It is not equal to Dharma, religion, in the Judeo-Christian tradition. I just want to point it out because the concept of Atma and Paramatma, debate and discussion continued with British colonial Judeo-Christian perspective and spread in the English-speaking world today, and that's what I know the term religion. But if you look at the etymology and go detail into it, you will not find the term existing anywhere. The term is dharma, which is still used in Buddhism, used in Jainism. Sikhism appeared much later, 15th century, against again the same Sanatana Dharma rigidity of ritualism. So I'm not going to touch upon that, but I want to indicate that all these religions followed a strictly oral tradition of transmission of knowledge from one generation to another generation. That continues even today when two Buddhist teachers meet and talk. Brahmin meet and he talks. So I want to emphasize that mindful communication is interactive process between two individuals, between disciple and the guru, and so forth and so. I should be understood that way and explained that way, and not just as a technique. Accepting the linguistic limitation in expressing Buddhist thoughts accurately in English within historical and political frame, Buddhist mindful communication, there is a need to develop communication strategy for historical, for promotion of sustainable development that must be debated and will be discussed in the contemporary world in order to reduce conflicts and contradictions. It is suggested that in doing so, Buddhist Paritraya, Samupada, doctrine and belief must be kept in forefront. The Buddhist preaching of Pratriya and Sampada clearly enunciate that there is a high degree of interdependence of being in the universe in all forms. That is something Buddhism contributed a great deal, and we have to appreciate that and live with it to understand why mindful communication is important. In brief, no attempts have been made to put forward some of the thoughts to outline possible ways and conflicts-free sustainable development for free sustainable. That's what I'm reducing and taking the word out, conflict, and putting free sustainable development, free from conflict sustainable development. Further, it is humbly suggested to promote conflict-free strategy for sustainable development. The suggested strategy solution must be found within the Asian continent and Asian philosophy, which at the times are in direct contradiction, are in opposition to the values and ethos of Judeo-Christian tradition, and ethos creating conflict in the values and ethics of Buddhist and Asian doctrines of thought. So Buddhist teaching related to attachment or Labh, aversion or hatred, dosha, and ignorance of delusion, moh, should be strictly followed with all conscious effort that would help minimize structural violence at various levels within society, whether individual, family, religion, national, or global. It should be contextualized in the rapidly changing environmental climate due to human greed, hatred, and ignorance that largely believe in humans that they control positive and destructive forces, which I, according to Buddhist and I'm a Hindu, both ways is not possible. It is proposed to avoid persuasion in which mindful communication would play a critical role. In parallel, methods means should be found by Buddhist scholars to restrict unprecedented penetration and use of digital media through mindful communication at primary, higher, and secondary school level. Because today, I came here this morning at the airport, even in the car, the man was continuously using his machine. To what he was communicating, I do not know. It has led to very serious problems, at least in Asia. Fake news, inaccurate news, God knows how many things are happening, and we don't know how to live in that world. So I would suggest that we should look at very carefully an educational level. There should be introduced in media and communication curriculum in Asian countries, especially with Asian countries, where that is happening much more. I have suggested earlier in the to Dr. Kalinga on this issue. It should minimize impeding serious threat to human existence. Equally important would be introduce mindful media and communication ethics in the digital era of today, because we are still working on Judeo-Christian tradition of media ethics, which may not be workable to us. The last portion of this little presentation I have talked about that there is a glaring gap of research related to mindful communication, that too in Buddhist context. We talk. I go to United States to hear about mindful communication classes, 6 week special training. But we ourselves within the Asian country know very little what research we have done on it. It's high time that we should spend time and energy to do some research. It would require area-specific Buddhist-focused research that would promote and support Asian new Buddhist means and methods of promoting mindful communication, both as a teaching level as well as in a practice level. Today, several Asian governments and private and media companies have invested enormous funds to promote education and development and also earn profit from this. I think that you need to look at very carefully, because that is what is happening all over Asia, that people are making money out of mindful communication and not paying any heed to what it's going to do to us. Though stated goals are to achieve and promote social and democratic political values, such researchers should be an integral part of media and communication education. So far, both teaching and research of media and communication are largely based on Euro-American centric theories and approach of Asia. My colleagues have talked about it, so I'm not going to say anything on it. If Asia would not to offer any understanding of human communication, the earliest record is that Buddhists talked a great deal about human behavior and discussed it, but we ignore. Freud has said it, that's correct. Rest is not correct. So it's high time, I think, we should look into it very, very carefully. The last 2 lines I want to say that behavior is consequently sustainable development requires better understanding of human behavior. Buddhist mindful communication could offer fresh approach, content, and theory to achieve goals of sustainable development within the framework of mindful communication. Thank you.
I'm handing over the mic to you, please, Kalinga.
Can I have a PowerPoint? Okay, what we will do is now in the program, we have a 1 hour session where we open up for discussion, interactive discussion, which I would moderate. So the panel will stay on. What I would do first is I will briefly go through a proposal which has been submitted to Vishwabharati in Shantiniketan. Yeah, the head of the journalism mass communication department, which is newly established from this year, it has become a department. Professor Binod Lolo Chowdhury is very keen on introducing some programs on mindful communication for sustainable development. First, we were talking about a 2-year master's program, and I did a proposal for him, but later we changed our mind, and we thought it's better to look at short-term programs rather than a master's level 2-year program. So the latest proposal I have done, I'll briefly go through it and open it up for discussion, because it's not only Shantiniketan, it can be done anywhere. Nalanda can also look at it. Kalinga University in Sri Lanka. Then we have from Laos and Thailand communication scholars. So we would like your input into it. And because in this conference, we want to make certain recommendations. And one thing, I need somebody to take some minutes so we can do our final proposal. Anybody here or out there who, Vichitra, you can, right? Okay, thanks. Okay, so let me go to it. So we call it a certificate program in mindful communication for sustainable development. So the program objectives are to enable graduates to have a good understanding of the Asian philosophical thought related to development issues, like Dr. Binod just mentioned, and also Dorjie mentioned as well, to encourage graduates to challenge existing development models and become creative in designing new models that may be more suitable for Asian environment and cultural norms, to enable graduates to have a good knowledge of development models that are sustainable and people-oriented. Then the program outcomes would be ability to apply mindful concepts in planning and implementing sustainable development projects, to lobby and convince development planners, government and non-government development agencies to adopt mindful sustainable development programs and projects, to be change agents for grassroots development in Asia. Yeah, before we go to now, these short-term courses could be directed not only in training journalists. That's why earlier in my presentation I said we should talk about communicators. So it could be for development workers, even for NGOs, even monks, because we need more temples to be development centers. So let's talk about communicators rather than journalists. So the program object, course outline, it could be face-to-face teaching, workshops, and short field and research and report writing. Now, the first model I have proposed in the proposal, which is with Vishwabharati, is 8 weeks, 2 months course. I got this idea because Indian Institute of Mass Communications have been running a course on development journalism for about 40 years now for NAM, non-aligned countries, a 2 months course, which the Indian government funds as scholarships to bring in. So we are looking at a similar model introduced by India. Maybe the Indian government funds it similarly at Nalanda or Vishwabharati or wherever as the pilot. So the stage 1 would be 4 weeks, face-to-face teaching. This will include students taking up some compulsory courses. Stage 2 is also face-to-face, but they would take up supplementary subjects. So stage 1 it would be Each module, students may sit for a test or do an individual assignment. Each module will include a 1-hour lecture and 3-hour tutorial each week for 4 weeks. One module will be development theory and sustainable development. Second one, sufficiency economics theory. Because in understanding of sufficiency economics is very important for development communication, even business reporting and economic reporting. Then the third is different thoughts of communication. So we look both West and Eastern thoughts of communications, communication theory. And then we'll have also during the first 4 weeks, workshop modules that include 3 to 6 hours of instructions and 6 to 9 hours of practical work spread over 4 weeks. One could be on mojo journalism, Mr. People there is expert on. And then the other one is podcasting, because today radio, podcasting is becoming a very important alternative to radio, live radio listening. Mojo journalism, mobile journalism, using the mobile phone and those cheap software applications. Then the third workshop will be feature writing as a communication tool. That's the stage one, first 4 weeks, first month. In the second month, we'll go into same model, 1-hour lecture, 3-hour tutorial per week for 4 weeks. These are more like supplementary courses like rethinking development, rethinking communication theory from RASA to mindful communication. Then methodology of social and communication research, rural development concepts and experiences in Asia, which is 2 weeks because it will. It could also need maybe the other 2 weeks there could be a field trip and some report writing. Then the workshops would be looking at old and new trade systems and its impact on development. Things like the Silk Roads, the new BRI and India's Mekong Ganga cooperation, like the new trade deals, look at it from a development perspective. Then the role of ICTs in sustainable development. This is ICTs as communication, development communication tools. Mindful communication for sustainable development, ideas from Asia. And role of culture in development, because culture itself can be a development tool, especially now we are coming into tourism, like community tourism and things like that is a development issue. And the successful graduates after the 2 months could be awarded a professional certificate in mindful communication for sustainable development by the institute which offers this. So that's one module. And the shorter courses I have proposed is Introduction to Mindful Communication for Sustainable Development, which could be a 2 weeks course on introducing theories and the concept to development planners, communication scholars, teachers, NGO workers, etc. Another one could be Introduction to Sufficiency Economics and Sustainable Development. It could be a seminar style 1 week course, could be offered for development workers, economists, economic business lecturers, NGO workers, development monks, or etc., as an introduction to introducing sufficiency economics concept in their development planning and education work. Then another one is community tourism planning, because tourism is becoming a big revenue earner as well as sometimes quite controversial in the way it's run. Now, last 3 days we have been looking at Buddhist tourism, visiting the Buddhist places. But one thing I was talking with him this morning, Buddhist tourism in India need Buddhist communities around Buddha Gaya, Rajgiri. There are no Buddhist communities. If you don't develop Buddhist communities, it's like looking at a zoo, just looking at monuments. So to create, because if you go to Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, there are Buddhist communities around. There are festivals which come up as a result. And in Thailand, particular, Thailand is encouraging what is called community-based tourism, so that community earns more than the companies, mainly foreign companies. So we can bring this mindful communication concept into workshops or certificate programs on community tourism planning. It could be 1 week, it could be 1 month, depending on the needs. Then the other one is important, like what Dr. Binod mentioned, the importance of social and communication research to set up research programs Partner universities can introduce a master's program by thesis, not by coursework. Adopting these ideas into their thesis. The program could last anything between 1 to 2 years duration because it need not have lectures and workshops as part of it. And the students could be attached to a particular university for the duration of the program, but they may not need to be there physically. So we may also try and get UNESCO endorsement for the course, as it is a follow-on to the UNESCO IPDC funded project we did at Chulalongkorn. In fact, when we put up the website at the end of the project, I had an argument with a UNESCO official, she's a French woman, who said some of our concepts were against UNESCO's policies about media pluralism and freedom of expression. Then I said, if it is against UNESCO policies, then we are practicing it. so we refused to change it. And they ultimately they agreed with us. Okay, fair enough. We are looking at this, and especially they were not happy with human rights concepts we are promoting. Like previous speakers spoke about human rights, we are focusing more on the community rights rather than the individual rights. Now that is where UNESCO itself need to change, and it will not change unless we push from Asia through projects like this. So this is the idea. So we'll open up for discussion, because at the end of by 1:30, if we can come up with some ideas how something could be started on a pilot scheme. I don't know if you want to start about if Nalanda can get into it.
Okay. My friend has put my name as or my designation. I'm yet to join there. Of course, I'm designated Vice Chancellor, but I'm yet to join. So after joining there, I'm very happy to see that communication, mass communication, media, how can it be given a new direction which is more responsive and responsible towards society. Nowadays, we are fed up with all news, social media, and TV and all that. Always there is rape, there is murder, as if this is the only reality of the society. So we are already fed up, and there is no responsibility on the part of the media how to whether it will be good for the society or not. Of course, that is also correct. That is also truth. If something wrong happens, that is also a reality. But should it be there only? Should there be any responsibility on the part of the media or not? So these models that we have suggested seems to be quite good, and it may give some better direction to the media and the people as such. And I welcome, and I assure that whenever I join there, first of all, let me get settled there, and I will definitely think over it. And I would rather invite you to be there, to be with us and give some direction how to make it to practice, reality.
Yeah, we have a few people who are involved with our project at Chulalongkorn, myself, Dorjie and Binod and many others. People up here, Homala from Laos, so who could be resource people as well.
Yes, yes.
What about from Laos or Thailand? Can we have a feedback? Have you got a mic? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very good. It is a good course actually. If we can offer, it will be really helpful, especially for the media. So because what I feel is that about this course is it's gonna take the media from what we teach the media how they're gonna be the journalists from the normal course that they have been taught. But if the media can learn from this course, they will take another perspective of how they're going to report about the development issues and cultures with their mindfulness and moralities. So I think this course if we can do, it's a very short course. It's a good, I think, rather than master also good. But if we can have more short training, is better. So when I look at in the content of the course, is very suitable, especially we have to understand the sustainable development concept and the communication concept, and also mindfulness. Because many questions coming now from the Western countries or even in the ASEAN country, that what does it mean about mindfulness? People don't really understand what mindfulness is. So we have to take this course and tell people what it is. I think I agree with this course. Thank you.
I suppose to introduce something like this in Laos, especially through the Lao University, it has to be taught in Laotian. So we need to prepare maybe curriculum, which we already have some from the Sri Lankan project, and you can prepare specific ones which the English copy can be translated into Lao and adopted locally.
Yes, thank you very much. I am from Labh, from National University of Laos, the Department of Mass Communication. As Dr. Kalinga said, that I joined the Mindful Communication Conference before, seminars, not conference, yeah. And we did the, how to say, modify the curriculum about mass communication. Of course, I did, and I implement some idea from that seminars to our curriculum, and right now is during the modifying. But I think that if we can do this, especially the short term, it means the 8 weeks or 2 weeks, I really do agree with this if we have this course, because we can translate into Lao, and we can do the seminars in Lao too, especially for the young educators and also for our students, because of course they do bachelor degree at university, and we don't have concept about this, we don't have the course about this. If we can implement this course to that one, we can have the seminars, and we can take some time during the vacation or sometime, and it will be good for our student at university and also for the teacher. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea that Dr. Kalinga has proposed that we can run the program in the local language like Laos. So if you want to do that, so we are ready to help with the translations and to set up. I think it's better to start with like a workshop, so we can see how the progress is and the possibility of to further the course into the maybe bachelor degrees or something in the university. Thank you.
Actually, recently you wrote an article for Lotus Features about how monks are being trained there in development work. Do you think we can use this type of workshops for those monks programs?
Oh, that, yeah. I will take these ideas and discuss with the Buddhist development project in Laos, because they already played a role there. So if they can, we can take this course and into their the program that they are running now. So that could be very good, because they are training a number of monks, those who work in the grassroots in the social development. So I think start with the monk also is another excellent ideas.
Perhaps maybe like Lao University and the monks, the group which is training monks, can work together. Then the university gives a certificate to the monks who complete. Is it possible in Laos?
Actually, what they are doing now under they call that the Buddhist volunteer spirit for development. So they train the monks to work in the community. After completed the project, the programs, so they offer also the certificate to the monks. So if we can take this course to that program, so we can offer as well.
Okay, thanks. Here in the front.
My question is not related to the cost directly, but in an indirect way. In your presentation also, you did mention how corporates have got control of mainstream media. We have talked about greed, ignorance, hatred. Greed is consumerism. Hatred is the military industrial complex and the armament industry using religion by political forces and governments. It's not so much religious conflict, but religious sentiments being used by governments, mendacious governments. Mindfulness is important because we have withdrawn from the present moment with mindlessness. In this absence, the corporates have moved in with their Twitters and their Facebook, social media, mainstream media, everything. My question is, it takes a lot of courage. And courage was one of the qualities of the Buddha, besides wisdom and compassion. It takes a very courageous journalist or a communicator to speak truth to power, to do that vipassana insight into reality as it is. Reality is not just people with religious beliefs fighting with each other. Reality is not, as we have put in the concept note, people destroying the environment. It is not people who destroy the environment. Indigenous people, tribals have always protected the environment. It's governments in the hands of corporate bullies who destroy the environment. How do we ensure that when we teach future journalists or communicators mindfulness, create harmony, that we do not make them simply pliable tools in a propaganda machine of the government? And we have seen this. You have also yourself mentioned our English television channels, especially in India. Most of them are tools of some corporate or the government, whichever be the government in power. How then do we how do we raise a red flag? How do we be cautious about this? That mindfulness is not being an apologist for the establishment.
Okay, you make a good point. The corporate power of the media. My personal view is it's very difficult to fight this, but that's why we have to build up media from the grassroots. The fact that even the television, commercial television has lost its economic model, and that's why they are going into this shouting panel discussions to get viewers back. But there are grassroots, the social media, which is becoming more and more popular. That's where I think we need to focus. Maybe Pipop, you can make some, because you have had some experience in Thailand trying to confront or challenge this corporate dominated media there. And you're in the public service broadcasting network now.
Okay, thank you. My name is Pipop Panichpat from Thai PBS. Well, in my afternoon session, I will go into that, whether the public will pay for the mindful, quote unquote, for the mindful media. And it's proven beyond my doubt, at least, that they will, I will use the cave boy rescue incident, which everybody in this room must know, that it turns out that I use mindful communication method in the transmedia format, not only on one format alone. And it proves beyond all doubt that general people really looking forward for reason, facts, and something that go above and beyond greeds and hatred, as you mentioned. So to cut the story short, I think there is so much hope in this, but we have to work really hard and, like he said, courageously bring the truth to the open. It won't be well. I think the core of mindfulness is being truthful, right? So by doing that, of course, we need to go full frontal with what is not right also. So that's my take on it.
And when you do that, you will offend a lot of people. You will hurt a lot of feelings. They will claim that their feelings and sentiments have been hurt. That is, I think, a creative tension, being mindful about the other and bringing reality up front in your face. And it has to be done because there are very few courageous people who do this. Everybody has been sold out, and you accepted that in your own address. Therefore, I say, besides these ideals and sentiments, we need to have something which is like a beacon that tells us that we are not going to become tools. We are not, the middle way is not an apologetical part between what is right and what is wrong. There can be no balanced view in journalism between the earth is flat and the earth is round. That has already been established. So let's not pretend that we are doing that sort of balance.
You see, I can remember about 20 years ago in the Philippines, I visited a community radio station run by Catholic Jesuit priests. And this priest told me after I spent a weekend with him in his rural area, and it's a very successful community radio station run by the church. They call development radio, not evangelical radio. And he said to me, you have only 2 eyes and 2 ears. And if you can get the attention of the people in that community with the 2 ears for your radio station, then don't worry about these powerful commercial networks which are coming there. They're not listening to you, they will listen to you. So, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Sisira Vijay. I'm the media advisor to the Commander of the Army in Sri Lanka, as well as the Secretary General of the Sri Lanka Press Association. Well, we have taken up this brilliant idea and the proposition that Dr. Kalinga Senarat has, taken so much of efforts to prepare. The one concern I have is that now, apart from the graduate courses which you have proposed, I very sincerely and very authentically believe I would be able to get this introduced to the Sri Lanka Press Institute in Sri Lanka, where such courses are normally conducted and sort of say formulated, considering different perspectives. I would love to get the, for example, the entire thing, or rather the short courses at the first phase, under the first page, and I will get it translated into Sinhala and Tamil as well, and try to go and have a discussion as to how we can implement it, right? And that I will assure you, and I hopefully believe that we can communicate and get this thing done. And once again, on behalf of all our colleagues who are here from Sri Lanka, we have editors from the largest circulated newspaper, English newspaper in Sri Lanka. We have one of the brilliant directors, film directors, from whom you will hear tomorrow. And also we have Sri Lanka Television, National Television, as well as the private tone television representatives and university colleagues here. So I believe we all will be able to, as a collective, will be able to, do something with your brilliant proposal. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I will put a footnote to you for your consideration. Dr. Samarjiva, who was once upon a time your Director General of Television Sri Lanka. Samarjiva.
Telecom, I think.
Yes.
Rohan Samarjiva.
Rohan Samarjiva. He, pardon? Right, he's from, but in terms of policy, we had a meeting in the beginning of this year, and he enunciated beautifully how it can be done. So maybe you can consider, if he's in good terms, to invite and ask him what is his thoughts on that. We had a meeting in Media Research Center, Manipal.
Okay.
School of Communication in the beginning of the year. And he...
Based on the same proposal, same module.
No, the module was not.
Okay.
We were talking about policy,
okay.
Communication policy, how to bring about change in curriculum and things like that.
I got it. But we were we were very much concerned about this project.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
So I thought he'll put some inputs for you. And
Uh,
Ashoka is another person from your television private channel.
Yeah, it is a very nice proposition that you want to come up with these new certificate courses. But I feel this sustainable development is such a vast subject. The participants or the future communicators should be aware of where we should concentrate, in which fields where we should bring about this sustainable development. For example, we were talking about that sufficiency economics. It is good, very nice. It may be comprising a lot many things. And Mr. Yaspi also pointed out about environmental protection. But what I feel is, in addition to all these fields where we have to concentrate on sustainable development, there are more dangerous things that are happening, and whereby we are very, very, you know, uh, doubtful about our future. Instead of talking about the future of our generations, that is these science and technology part. The communicators should be given a sort of emphasis that they should also think on those lines. If the modules, if the inputs do not contain such topics, these communicators, these youngsters, they may forget to look from that perspective. Like automation, it is just increasing without any bounds and leaps, and AI technologies like nuclear technologies. So all those topics should be involved there, incorporated there in such a way that these 4, 5, 6 weeks courses may be little bit shorter, but we may think of some researches, some special incentives for longer courses like that. Thank you.
Vichitra, now I understand you have also adopted some of the mindful communication concepts
Yes,
in your
yes.
teaching course at
That's right.
IMC.
At IMC, I've already done that with the foreign journalists as well as the Indian journalists on humanistic development stories. My suggestion was that those who are already in the media, some kind of a short mid-career not training or a look at a different perspective. So it is easier to get this into the mainstream if people who are already, instead of the new ones who are already there, to bring them in for short-term courses. And in this context, if something can be added in the curriculum on the history of journalism, how it evolved when it started in America, the American Revolution, there was confrontation. Therefore, they were reflecting what the society needed at that time. Now, what is happening in the society, we want to go forward. So it has to be evolutionary journalism along with evolutionary economics, evolutionary history, current affairs, what it is, some kind of thing, so that it blends into what we are talking and it's easy to comprehend this perspective of journalism. So it's not a standalone.
Okay, thank you. Professor Kamalra, do you want to add, or would you keep it for your presentation in the afternoon? Because we have been talking about introducing something similar to this in Thailand, which is university.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm from the Open University, so I'm thinking that the mindful communication is a term because right now we are talking a lot about the free education by the blended learning. So I'm thinking that we might adding up some kind of the distant mode because in the case of Thailand, like now uh, the 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 phenomenon of the self-direct learning and the phenomenon of the traffic or kind of the quick changing of technology and kind of thing. So like now, we have talked a lot among the professional media organization that how can we empowering all the journalists or the communicator to be well equipped with the ongoing necessary knowledge and skill. And then the one among the demanding is the mindful communication. I'm thinking about the this subject because like now people are like going to be one one mindset, like we are going to be the global citizen. We talk in the similarity along the way. We also have our own root, kind of that. So I think that I do totally agree with this kind of courses, but the design of the courses instead of face to face, 100% of the face to face, it might be kind of the blended learning and then use more technology to be embedded to make it more the dynamic kind of. And then the way to present it, it might be kind of the e-training in the sake of certificates and kind of any kind of certificate we need to be more analyzed. Thank you.
Thanks. Dorjie, last year I did a workshop in Bhutan with the Bhutan Media Foundation on this topic. And I can remember at the end of it, one of the television journalists told me, since I joined the profession, we have been talking about applying Buddhist concepts into the media, but now I see the connection. How can we take it forward from there?
Well, definitely, as someone mentioned, for existing journalists, we need to hold some seminar type of workshops for a few days. But in terms of the certificate course that you are proposing, it's definitely something that the Royal University can offer as a part of their regular offerings. It is, I think, we would be very happy to take a lead in that. And I also agree with our last speaker when she mentioned that perhaps these can be put online and offered online to have a greater reach, not just within what we can do face to face, but more of a global reach. And that also is in tune with what you have mentioned earlier, that we become more or less the center for mindfulness communication, and not that we learn from somewhere from MIT or from Yale. So I think I support trying to harness the power of technology to get a wider audience, not just face to face.
Yes, I want to come back to Sri Lanka. Like you mentioned about press council during the courses. We have Baidyanath from Kalinga University and also Sugath. With Sugath, I have been talking with both of you. I have given lectures at universities on these topics. Can you see a synergy between working together or even introducing a research program, like I mentioned, master's by thesis or something on this topic?
I'm mentioning that we are revising our syllabus, undergraduate syllabus, and we hope to introduce mindful communication as a subject, as a coursework. And we also hope to introduce mindful communication for our master degree program. And we are thinking about introduce some certificate courses. And we also have mass media research institute, the campus, and we can do some collaborative research on mindful communication.
Because you were also involved in a book Shelton Gunratna did on mindful. I can't remember the name.
We have written a book on mindful communication, new ethics in digital era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kalinga, the problem is I see somewhere else. A block of countries in the United States of America, Europe, if they don't accept it, our students, our teachers, are going to be indifferent towards it. So we have to find ways and means to influence those who have been dominating for such a long time the scene of communication, media and communication in the world. What we have done in 70s and 80s, find out how the flow of American serials affected India, Asia as a whole. We didn't do other way around, how Asian programs have influenced them. So I think there is some need to convince our colleagues on the other side of the world to accept that is a legitimate requirement of Asia.
Actually, the UNESCO project came about when I read about the MIT offering courses in mindful communication for $600.
Yeah.
So I thought before they come and set up these courses in Asia, we need to take the initiative.
Right.
Otherwise, we have to pay
you must do that.
to learn
You
our
must
own
do that.
wisdom.
But the point is that that course will be acceptable to a large number of people, but our courses will not be acceptable to everyone. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think, in principle, what I'm hearing, they're very good ideas, and I think the idea of having a mindful communication for sustainable development course and also a training network is important. I think where we are missing something quite fundamental in this is what I think of as an Asian pedagogical approach. When we look at Nalanda University, there was always a combination of study and practice. What we are talking about in this whole course outline is very much a study form from the Western model, and where we miss the practice. If you're talking about the word mindful, you know, we're doing some courses now with educators, with the CRPF. They've asked for courses on mindfulness. We are not teaching mindfulness in terms of what is the theory and what is the, you know, neuroscience. I mean, I might speak for 2 minutes on that, but for 3 days we are practicing mindful breathing, mindful walking, mindful eating, mindful communication, how to do this conflict resolution through mindful speech, mindful outreach, but it's all practice. And that is the strength of Asia. Why has Asia not succeeded? So if you're going to go and do a course, we will fail because we're following the Western model. When you see the archaeology of Nalanda, we were there 2 days ago in Nalanda. What did you notice? They're all the viharas and all the chaitya halls. I don't know a single university in the West or even in India today, including the new Nalanda University, which has any place for practice. It has a library, which is the only place. That again is intellectual. The whole pedagogical approach of India was study and practice, and debate. And so if we want to be successful in the world and turn the corner for Asia, we have to look at our own strength of practice. So I would think that a course like this, unless you bring practice, and then if you bring practice, we have the professionals, we have the monks, we have lay people, we have great teachers of mindfulness practice, and we are the Asian living. I mean, Buddhism is living here. Mindfulness is not coming from the West. Mindfulness is coming from Buddhism primarily, as a word, as a practice. Where are the Buddhists? Where are the 450 million Buddhists? So that's one main point I would say, and I think it's controversial, but I think it's crucial. The other thing, when you call about a network, and I agree with my friend Aspi, because if you're alone, it's very tough to be courageous. But we need to build a sangha, and again, that is a very Buddhist, a very Indo-Asian idea. A network is much more. It's like a network, but a sangha has a much deeper sense of interbeing, of practice again. So again, you can't break the sangha so easily. So again, I would say the practice infuses into the sangha. So you look at the Buddha Dhamma model in a way. And lastly, I just make one point, and I think you have to look at what is our model of communication in India. If you look at something like the Kumbh Mela, where we get 20 million or 40 million, whatever the figures are touted, not only now, but even in the 7th century when Harshvardhan was there, you know, hundreds of thousands of people would come to a Kumbh Mela. There was no internet. There was no advertising. It is only in the last 2 Kumbh Melas that there's advertising going on with the UP government and others. But 20 million people come without one advertisement on TV. It's just only, that is a particular type of Asian or Indian communication network. We have to study that and see where is that coming from. It's beyond internet, and the internet can collapse tomorrow with some technological, they're so dependent on technology, that if somebody will want to destroy it, you attack at those points, and the whole communication net and can fumble. And then where? So I think it's a very good idea to do this course, but look at the course and develop the course. I would suggest, as my humble opinion as a non-academic, is to really bring the practice. And then the Nalanda University, everyone will come flocking to that. I would go for a course like that if there was practice. Where I'm going to study mindful communication, somebody wrote an article, is great. But that should be combined. So it's a 4-week course, do 2 weeks of practice, or practice in the morning, study, practice, things like that.
Yeah,
Actually,
thank you.
I simply want to add a footnote to what you have said. In my research, the question was asked to me, how so many people know about Allahabad Kumbh? If they are not literate, they cannot read calendars. How do they reach this information and how they act upon it? And that was the only question
what
asked.
did you answer? What did you answer?
Verbal oral communication, networking among people. That was the answer.
This is rather our strength. And we
So
have to show it.
how do we use this in mindful communication? The same technique.
Actually, on one of the curriculums we developed at Chulalongkorn by my colleague Supapong, in fact, she was supposed to come here, she couldn't make it. Now, she developed this 12-week or 14-week course for a semester-long course on human-centered journalism. And the first week is doing exactly that, meditation, training them in deep listening. That means meditation, vipassana techniques. The first 2 weeks of a journalism course. I don't know if anybody has done it before. But we haven't introduced it in Chulalongkorn yet because there was a change in management there and PR people came in. So
I think now the scenario is changing, and we are not always supposed to look at the West and their certification. We can do it ourselves. Bharatvarsh is now being recognized as a great power, despite so many shortcomings. So we have nothing to worry about. Bharatvarsh, including this, our Sanatan tradition, Buddhist tradition, Jain traditions, all these are different modules, and it's a very wonderful idea, and we can go ahead. Professor Makhalal, please.
Thank you very much. Since the talk is going on syllabus framing, I thought that I could put in something which has been part of my life in 43 years, being associated with the university system. One of the major problems which I have faced, and I'm speaking from personal experience, that as he rightly pointed out, Seth, that whatever the activities, whatever the tradition, whatever the part of life is one part, and syllabus framing is one part. That has been normally the case in India. But when we started following the British or European tradition, whole thing got divorced. And as you rightly pointed out, Kumbh Mela, it's not intellectual discussion. It's not part of the syllabus to know that. It's not part of journalism to teach that. It's part of the life. There has always been something in India ingrained as a part of life, and that should be treated as such in the syllabus. When you divorce both of this, rightly he pointed out, Dr. Binod Aggarwal pointed out, a illiterate man, for right from time of Harshvardhan or even earlier, we know from Puranas, we know from Smritis and others, Kumbh Mela has been happening, no advertisement. But people right from Kanyakumari to Kashmir converging at Allahabad. There was neither a syllabus nor information system, not journalism or anything. So and same thing was there, if you look at the entire education system in ancient India, including Buddhist and Jain, whole practice was part of your syllabus. And I can point out one example of Jivak and others. When a student, all that was there, completed the syllabus, completed the course, all that teacher said, medical, that please choose what you want to do. You have to go out and choose, live in a village and show that you have earned the knowledge. He chooses a village full of lemons. Everybody was shocked. Lemon is Amrit itself. It doesn't require, it's a medicine. But when Guru asked, why did you choose? After 7 years studying medicals, you are choosing. He said, lemon itself may be amrit, but it's one seed in the stomach can destroy the person completely. That's why I have chosen that. That kind of practical and theoretical knowledge went on. And I'm very sorry to say that when the Indian university systems came in second part of 19th century, this whole traditional knowledge center was separated from that. And that's why today our education system is not producing the really knowledgeable people. What Arvindo said, soulless education or rootless education. So you are talking about, I'm very happy that Seth has mentioned this. Please, when you are making the syllabus, just see what is the part of curriculum, which is part of your daily life, which is part of your spiritual life, which is part of your social life and intellectual life. If you combine all that together, you will make a better educated person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think we need to wrap up this session. Can I just summarize it? And I think you have got the you got the okay. The first is Laos. Now in Laos, we could work together because what we will say is IBC will play a coordinating role. We need to set up a committee, a media committee, what we call standing committee, whatever we call it. So it has to be post conference. We have to discuss with Venerable Dharmacharya. We have to get together and structure it within IBC. What I say is IBC will play a coordinating role. So with Laos, maybe Lao University and the monks training program can work together. We could provide resources to do training in Laotian. Okay. Then Thailand, Dr. Kamarat said it can be, you can look into a, did you say online based program?
Now, and is a curriculum for all the people, even the marginalized, even the general community people. But we cannot fast track two of them in a short time. So I think that at the beginning we might better have some kind of certificate program, even the e-certificate or the physical certificate or the blended one with
to be offered through Open University.
Like now we work very closely with the National Association of Newspaper. I don't know that how possible it is, but we have to decide how to fit it. But I do agree because in Thailand now we I also will share in my presentation in this afternoon. But I would confirm that right now the Thai society also really need the concept and practice of mindful communication. But I'm thinking about how to fit my how to put the fit down, kind of that. So let me think about that also.
Okay, thanks. In Sri Lanka, Press Council, Press Institute, you have a training program there. So you can provide certification and all that. So you would look into adopting these programs to be taught in Sinhalese, I suppose, or in English, or both. And it's something you can. Yeah. In Sinhalese. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Colombo and Kalinga could also look into it. Most probably a research by thesis program as well. So there would be 3 institutions in Sri Lanka who are interested in it. Where else? India, Nalanda.
We can ask, in addition to Nalanda, Manipal University.
Manipal.
They will be happy to collaborate. The only thing, they are fully self-supporting, so they would need a little money to run it.
It's a private university?
It's a private university. It's India's first private university. First accredited India's rank 1 private university.
So you would look into that possibility?
No, I'm officially right now advisor to them, so I can go and ask them immediately. That's
Okay,
not a big
so
deal.
there's a possibility of Shantiniketan also.
Shantiniketan is already there.
Yeah, I think the proposal is with Vice Chancellor at the moment. Bhutan. Well, you said the Royal Bhutan University.
And also the Bhutan Media Foundation can make it a regular seminar.
They have fairly active media foundation there. Bhutan Media.
Yeah, I can't see Singapore adopting it. No, you want to, poor came from Singapore, you can make go.
I think for Singapore, I can't really speak for the establishment, but I'm also in a way an educator in Singapore for adult learners. So I do feel there is for those of you who are familiar with Singapore, we do have a lot of public funds available for training programs. Sorry, and if you have a good program, actually funding is not an issue, as contrary to your potential problem. We're always searching for good programs. So if a proper program can be presented and you can get a vehicle, institution to cover your program, actually funding will not be an issue. But of course, it's catered mainly for Singaporeans. But then you can get actually a certain start from there. So there's too much details, but the government does put in a lot of money for funding, for training, etc. Yeah.
You think University of Singapore University or Nanyang can support us on that?
There are three universities. I can't speak for them because, as I mentioned, I'm more from the private sector, the adult learning side, and the government is fairly liberal in giving funds if you can prove that your program is useful. Yeah.
This is, I think you're talking about more community-based sort of programs. Like
Government of Singapore.
Yeah, Government of Singapore.
The government of Singapore actually provides a lot of money through community-based learning, skills-based learning, all areas, because manpower training is very important to us. Yeah.
And the problem with the two main universities, the National University of Singapore and NTU, where I used to teach and work, where AMIC was also based, because they are after global rankings. They're within the first 10 or first 15 in the global ranking. To get that global ranking, especially in the mass comm area, the program has been very Americanized. So something like this. Now I was teaching.
But that is happening everywhere. Why you are blaming them?
So
even in India, we are.
Yeah, I suppose it's a problem all over Asia, the ranking system, which is very America-centered. So that's why I was teaching a course in communication with Asian perspective, but there wasn't really a lot of support from the hierarchy. So that's why I think community-based training would be more a possibility. I don't know if Lim wants to mention about Malaysia or anyone else from Malaysia.
Hello, my name is Lim. I'm actually representing Buddhist channel. I'll be presenting later. For Malaysia, I don't think we have a kind of like a support for this sort of thing, especially from government institutions. Simply because I think they've been trying to play catch up with Singapore, and it's the same thing that you're saying. Ranking matters, and the American, the Western ranking system is very institutionalized, and that it becomes the kind of the bellwether, that we have to reach. So if you were to kind of set up a course like this, I would suggest to maybe follow the British IGCSE model, something like that. An independent program initiated by a think tank, for instance, maybe, and then supported by an established university, maybe Nalanda. Nalanda is very famous all over the world, and it has a history, an Indian history. Okay, so with that combination, you kind of work together with some universities, maybe from Thailand or Laos or wherever, to become the first mover adopters of this program. And that certification probably can be improved over time through this think tank. and through research, for instance. I think that's more valuable, you know. Yeah, if you look at the IGCSE model, it is an offshoot from the GCSE model from the UK. All right. So I think with that, get the brain power to build that one first. Get one key institution to adopt it, and then roll out to a few institutions as first mover, and then slowly it builds the momentum. I think I see that way going. Yeah.
Raymond from Hong Kong, you have anything? Raymond, you're there. Yeah.
I'm quite comfortable with the gentleman Buddhist Channel's editor's view. It's certainly true that we want to promote mostly a new paradigm, a new Asian-centered paradigm, and on principle, I'm completely in agreement. And I think, as I would have two thoughts. I echo completely Shantum's point on the practice aspect, because that's number one where Asia is most well positioned. And as we said, from a very sort of pragmatic perspective, we play to our strengths. You try to go toe to toe with, you know, the University of Colombia's School of Journalism. It's not easy, because even in Asia, there are students aspiring to journalism who will scramble for the chance to go to the University of Columbia for a scholarship in journalism, and there they're going to be, you know, saturated in, you know, the kind of libertarian sort of free press, fourth estate sort of New York Times kind of journalism that we all want to provide an alternative to. So yeah, but at the same time, it's true that when we talk of Asia, we don't want to. Well, not that we don't want to, but it's pretty hard to make it some sort of siloed operation. You know, like, okay, here are the Western methodologies, and here is the Asian methodologies. It might be theoretically possible, and in academic discourse, it might well be possible to articulate a kind of conception of Asian journalism completely detached from kind of like the sort of globalized and Western influenced stream of journalism that we're all used to. And by the way, which we often communicate in, given we all are English speakers. So I think the Asian vision of journalism should be one that places emphasis on Asian values, but is to at least a pragmatic degree integrated with at least some of the world institutions in regards to journalism. And I think that would really, it's not all about promoting, you know, oh, look how you know, Western we are. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. But we want to give those in the West and those who are plugged into the global channels of, you know, Financial Times, New York Times, and all that sort of thing, an outlet, an opportunity to see what we're doing, and to see that what we're doing is of value, and might even have something to teach them, to teach the traditional models of fourth estate investigative, what our friend Dorjie Wangchuck was saying. These are my 2 points. So, like, echoing Shantum's idea on practice, given I'm coming from a Buddhist journalist perspective, and echoing the gentleman on my right.
Okay, thanks, Raymond. And I think we need to wind up this session. We all need to go down and have some lunch. So thank you very much for the inputs. And it sounds very optimistic and very positive. So let's see how we can take this forward. It has to be a process, step-by-step process with small initiatives initially. Okay, thank you very much. And I think